A bishop who has nothing left to lose just spoke again, and when a man has nothing left to lose, he tells you the truth. Bishop Joseph Strickland, removed from his diocese of Tyler, Texas by Pope Francis in November of 2023, stripped of his pastoral office, silenced by the institution he devoted his life to, has been doing something remarkable ever since. He keeps talking, not with bitterness, not with the wounded pride of a man nursing his grievances, but with the urgency of a shepherd who no longer has a diocese to protect, but still has souls to warn. And his latest warning is one that the institutional church has been too cowardly to deliver clearly for decades. He looked directly at the camera and said it plainly. It is time for every Catholic to be clear. Freemasonry is incompatible with our Catholic faith. There is strong evidence that Freemasonry has infiltrated the leadership of the church and done immense damage. Get out. Come home. Confess. Now. Stay until the end, because what Strickland is saying is not conspiracy theory. It is 28 centuries of church teaching condensed into a warning that has never been more urgent. Because the infiltration he is describing is not abstract. It has names, it has consequences, and it explains with terrible clarity much of what is destroying the church from within right now. Bishop Joseph Strickland was born in 1958 in Nacogdoches, Texas. He was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Tyler in 1984. And in 2012, Pope Benedict XVI appointed him Bishop of Tyler. He was not a prominent figure. Tyler is a small diocese in East Texas. He was not a cardinal. He was not a Vatican insider. He was a diocesan bishop doing his job. But he had a habit that made him dangerous in the eyes of the institutional church. He said what he believed publicly, clearly, without diplomatic hedging, without the carefully calibrated ambiguity that characterizes most episcopal communication in the modern church. And in the Francis years, that habit became intolerable, because Strickland would not accept ambiguity on doctrine, would not stay silent on the confusion generated by Amoris Laetitia, would not pretend that Fiducia Supplicans was compatible with the faith, would not stop defending the traditional Latin Mass after Traditionis Custodes tried to suppress it, would not stop warning that the synodal process was leading the church toward rupture. And eventually, after years of pressure, Francis removed him, without canonical process, without charges, without giving Strickland the opportunity to defend himself. And Strickland, in response, said something that defined his entire subsequent ministry. I defended the truth and the Pope removed me, and I do not regret it. And since then, he has become something the institutional church did not intend to create when it removed him. A free voice, a bishop without a diocese is still a bishop. He still has apostolic succession, he still has episcopal authority, and he still has the obligation that every bishop carries by virtue of his ordination, the obligation to proclaim the gospel, to warn against error, to protect the faithful from spiritual danger. And he cannot be silenced by removing his administrative role, because his episcopal character is permanent, it is sacramental, it cannot be taken away. And so Strickland has used his freedom to say things that bishops with dioceses cannot say, because they fear losing their positions, their funding, their institutional standing, their relationship with the nuncio, their chance at a red hat. Strickland fears none of those things anymore, because he has already lost everything the institutional church could take from him. And so he speaks, and what he is saying about Freemasonry is not new doctrine. It is the most consistently condemned organization in the history of the Catholic Church. Since Pope Clement XII published the bull In Eminenti in 1738, just 21 years after the founding of modern Freemasonry in London in 1717, the Church has condemned it without interruption. Clement XII, Benedict XIV, Pius VII, Leo XII, Pius VIII, Gregory XVI, Pius IX. Leo XIII, who wrote an entire encyclical dedicated to Freemasonry called Humanum Genus in 1884, Pius X, Benedict XV, Pius XI, Pius XII. Every single pope from Clement XII in 1738 to Pius XII in the 1950s condemned Freemasonry explicitly, repeatedly, and with escalating force. That is 215 years of unbroken papal condemnation, not of individual Masons, not of lodges in particular countries, of Freemasonry as a system, as an ideology, as an institution incompatible with the Catholic faith. And the reasons are not arbitrary. They are theological and moral. Freemasonry at its core teaches religious indifferentism. The idea that all religions are equally valid paths to a supreme being called the Grand Architect of the universe, who is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the Trinity, not the Father of Jesus Christ, but a generic divine principle that Masons worship through ritual regardless of their religious affiliation. And this principle directly contradicts the first commandment, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." It contradicts the doctrine of the Holy Trinity. It contradicts the teaching of Christ that He is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through Him. And a Catholic who joins a Masonic lodge and participates in its rituals is not just joining a fraternal organization. He is participating in acts of worship directed at a deity that is not the Christian God. He is placing his Masonic oath above his baptismal promises. He is publicly demonstrating that he believes all religions are equally valid, which directly contradicts what he professes every Sunday in the Creed. And then there's the oath, because every Mason, upon initiation and at every subsequent degree, must swear an oath of absolute secrecy and loyalty to the lodge above all other allegiances, above family, above country, above religion. And if he violates that oath, the traditional penalties described in the ritual, which Masons claim are symbolic, but which are presented with graphic seriousness, include having his throat cut across, his tongue torn out by its root, and his body buried in the rough sands of the sea. And a Catholic who swears that oath has just committed a mortal sin, because he has placed an oath of human fraternity above his loyalty to Christ. He has made secrecy a supreme value, and he has bound himself to an organization whose most fundamental principles contradict the faith he professes to hold. And Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, signed a declaration in 1983 that was crystal clear. Catholics who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion. And that declaration was personally approved by Pope John Paul II, and it has never been revoked. Not by Benedict, not by Francis, not by Leo, but something changed after the Second Vatican Council. Because the Council, with its emphasis on dialogue, on finding common ground with other traditions, on ecumenism and religious freedom, created an atmosphere in which the ancient condemnations began to seem embarrassing, old-fashioned, needlessly confrontational. And while no pope officially lifted the condemnation of Freemasonry, the practical enforcement of it evaporated. Bishops stopped preaching about it. Catechists stopped teaching about it. Priests stopped warning about it in the confessional. And gradually, in many Catholic countries, the perception spread that it was no longer a serious issue, that the old condemnations belonged to a different era, that a Catholic could be a Mason and a Catholic simultaneously without contradiction. And in some countries, particularly in Latin America and in parts of Europe, prominent Catholic politicians, businessmen, even members of the clergy openly belonged to Masonic lodges. And nobody said anything. And Strickland is saying that is exactly what the enemy wanted. Because if you can neutralize the Church's resistance to Freemasonry, you can allow the infiltration to proceed without opposition. And when he says infiltration, he is not being metaphorical. He says there is strong evidence that Freemasonry has infiltrated the leadership of the Church. And that statement, which sounds extreme when you first hear it, becomes less extreme when you look at the historical record. Because in 1978, the year of 3 popes, Vatican journalist Mino Pecorelli published a list of 313 Vatican officials who he claimed were Freemasons. The list included cardinals, bishops, priests, and high-ranking Vatican bureaucrats. And Pecorelli was murdered the following year in a killing that was never conclusively solved, but that many connected to his journalism about Vatican secrets. And in the early 1980s, the Propaganda Do scandal rocked Italy when a list of members of an illegal Masonic lodge called P2, operating under the Grand Orient of Italy, was discovered. During a police raid, the list included politicians, military officers, intelligence officials, media figures, and several individuals with Vatican connections. And Michele Sindona, the Sicilian banker who had deep ties to the Vatican Bank and who was later convicted of fraud and murder, was connected to both the Mafia and to Masonic circles. And Roberto Calvi, the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, whose bank's collapse caused the largest bank failure in Italian history up to that point, and which was connected to the Vatican Bank through IOR, was found hanging under Blackfriars Bridge in London in 1982, a murder staged to look like suicide. And Calvi was a member of P2. And the Vatican Bank lost enormous sums through the Ambrosiano collapse. And the connection between Masonic networks, Vatican finances, and organized crime was never fully investigated or explained. And Strickland is not asking Catholics to reconstruct all of that history. He is not presenting himself as a conspiracy theorist. He is simply stating what the Church's own doctrine says and what the historical record supports. That Freemasonry is incompatible with the Catholic faith. That Catholics who belong to Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin. That they may not receive Holy Communion. That the infiltration of Masonic principles, even without formal lodge membership, the religious indifferentism, the placing of human fraternity above divine revelation, the relativism that denies that Christ is the unique and universal Savior, has done immense damage to the Church, and he is calling those Catholics home, not to condemn them, not to shame them, but to save them. Because a Catholic who is in a Masonic lodge is in a state of grave sin, and a Catholic in a state of grave sin who receives Holy Communion compounds his sin enormously. And that situation requires confession, repentance, formal withdrawal from the lodge, and return to full communion with the Church. And the timing of Strickland's warning is significant, because it comes at a moment when the Church is facing the most severe crisis of authority in its modern history. When a schism is threatening from the traditionalist right and a practical secession is threatening from the progressive left in Germany. When the Pope has assigned the most controversial cardinal in the Vatican to negotiate with the traditionalists. When the doctrine on homosexuality is being undermined from within by figures like Father James Martin, who have access to the Pope, when Marian titles are being censored, when the traditional Mass is under permanent threat, when priests are being cloned by artificial intelligence to defraud the faithful, and when the faithful themselves are confused, demoralized, and unsure who to trust, and into all of that confusion, Strickland delivers a warning that cuts through all of it. The confusion has a source. The infiltration is real. The enemy is not just outside the Church. He is inside, and has been for a very long time. And Strickland says something else that is even more unsettling. He notes that recently there have been voices within the Church claiming that Catholicism and Freemasonry are compatible, that the ancient condemnations are outdated, that a Catholic can hold a Masonic membership without contradiction, and he is calling that what it is. A lie. A lie designed to keep Catholics in spiritual danger while giving them comfortable assurance that they are fine. And it is a lie that could cost them their souls, because the doctrine has not changed. Cardinal Ratzinger's 1983 declaration has not been revoked. The faithful who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin, full stop. No pastoral nuance softens that. No synodal process changes it. No dialogue with the lodge modifies it. And any voice within the Church claiming otherwise is either ignorant or lying. And Strickland is too honest to pretend otherwise. Come out. Come home. Confess. The door is open. The mercy of God is infinite, but you have to walk through the door. And you cannot walk through it while you are still sitting in the lodge.